Good morning to one and all. So today we'll be continuing the session. The previous session, what we were discussing about, nothing but the basic concepts of your operating system that we have discussed. So yesterday's session we discussed about different basic concepts like users point of view, what are the different things we do have, and then we discussed about other concepts related to systems point of view, what exactly operating system is, what it does, and we also seen the different type of station like what we call operating systems like workstations, mainframes, and all. That all we have discussed it, and right now we will be discussing about something called the memory management. We were where we exactly stopped it. Okay, so Bootstrap program, all we have already discussed it. So fine, we'll go to that directly to that particular slide and we'll start. Okay, fine. So this is a slide from where we need to start exactly. So today we will discuss about storage structures. So what I mean by storage structure is nothing but we people are having lot of data with us and we wanted to store it. Basic thing what we need to do here is all the information which is present should be present in RAM. Actually we need to store whatever the data we have. That may be related to your movies, that may be related to your documentation, that may be related to your programs and all. All these uh, every file, every program, everything should be present in the main memory in order to get that executed. So what happens here, since the size of a memory is very small, we cannot add or we cannot store every information in that particular memory. And the other drawback of that is main memory is that the size is very less. We can't. And at the same time, it is volatile in nature. Volatile in the sense, once you people disconnect the power from your system, whatever the information that is present in your RAM, the main memory will get disappeared or vanished from that particular location. So whenever you people are resupplying the power, you will not get the content whatever you have stored earlier in that particular. So that is the major drawback. So definitely we require a separate storage structure where we can store our information securely, and that too it is not getting vanished or deleted once the power supply is discontinued. So that is the main thing. For that purpose, we come across this particular thing called a storage structure. So here the basics, the main memory what we do have here is nothing but RAM. You people know that. What do you mean by RAM is nothing but random access memory, and everyone knows that it's volatile in nature. Volatile in the sense nothing but once you people disconnecting the power, automatically whatever the data is present in that, it will be just vanished from that particular location. Something like Gajini. Once you're sleeping and getting up, whatever the previous day you did, everything will be vanished from your brain. So again, it's a new brain, new thing. Same way here. So here, this main memory is actually built using a device. We have a new technology called semiconductor technology. So using this semiconductor technology, this device has been actually developed. That is nothing but your RAM. So the semiconductor technology, what we have used here is what we call it as dynamic random access memory, DRAM. So earlier we used to have DRAM, and based upon this, and it is actually developed using semiconductors. So that's why he is calling it as semiconductor technology. Now this using DRAM, these people have started developing main memory. Okay, that is nothing but your RAM. So now apart from RAM, we also have other forms of memory, but among them we are right now we are going to discuss on two. In the next slide, you will be seeing the different type of memories what we do have. These are not only the memories what we are having here, but apart from that, we have other different type of memories too. Okay, so what are those? We'll see across here. So first, we are going to discuss here about ROM. So I think everyone knows about it, right? So what do you mean by ROM here? So that is nothing but read-only memory. So yesterday's session, I told you people related to pen drive that whenever you buy a pen drive, the size might be something, but the actual usage of the data, whatever the storage you will be provided to you will be different. Like for example, you have bought 4 GB of pen drive, but how much you can use it? Maybe 3.8 GB of your memory can be accessed. Remaining 0.20 memory, you cannot access it. Why? That is comes under read-only memory. Means it actually consists of some programs which are required to get integrated with other devices. That may be your personal computer, that may be your laptop, or that may be some other device like OTGs. Right now, you people can use pen drive. So you have a movie in a pen drive, you can directly watch in your smartphones if you have a OTG. Okay. So this way what happens? So how this OTG, with the help of OTG, your pen drive is getting connected to your mobile means that's only with the help of the program that is present in that particular pen drive. That get integrated with your mobile phone's operating system, and then we are able to access the files that are present in that particular what we call pen drive. Okay, so that is what called read-only memory. Same concept is implemented for your laptops, your personal computers, coming to your workstations, mainframe. Wherever you will see, you will have a random access memory. Not only that, even your smartphones. You might be buying a smartphone which has 32 GB of internal memory, but you cannot use the 32 GB. Definitely, you can use hardly 28 or something like that. That much amount of GB. Whatever the remaining means, it consists of programs. What kind of programs? Bootstrap program. Even your mobile phone, whenever you're rebooting your mobile phone, the operating system should be loaded into RAM. Then only it will start executing. So in order to make that operating system load in your RAM, definitely we need a program which can trigger it up. So that kind of programs are actually stored in ROM. Okay. Next, we have something called EEPROM. You know, this is important here. EEPROM. This is nothing but electrically erasable, programmable, read-only memory. Okay, it's an electrically erasable, programmable, read-only memory. So, what is the difference between ROM and EEPROM? Is very slight difference is there. ROM is nothing but once the data has been fed into ROM, you cannot change it for the entire lifetime. You means you cannot change until that device is existing. You cannot change whatever the programs are present in ROM. But whereas coming to EEPROM, yes, there is a possibility. You people can actually change, but the frequency with which you can change the program is very less. Means it's like maybe 2 or 3 times you can change the programs which is present in read-only memory. Okay. Apart from that, you people cannot change it. That is what comes under EEPROM. Because if you are trying to use it frequently for changing these programs, what will happen is your device will get corrupted. Your device will get damaged, and you may not be able to use that particular feature again. And once you know that if the ROM is getting damaged, definitely you can't trigger your operating system, and definitely the entire device is going to go into a scrap. So that is the thing. So next, another one what we have is EPROM. That is nothing but electrically programmable read-only memory. Why this electrical term is coming up here is nothing but, since I told you that whatever the program you might be writing using a C language or Java or everything, finally that should be converted into zeros and ones. And how that zeros and ones have been transmitted to the hardware, I already told you people, right? So it will be in the format of electrical pulses. Okay, pulse will have a time limit, like 5 seconds or something. So within that, if you're sending the electricity, so that will be represented as 1. And within the time pulse, if you're not sending any electrical current, then that will be represented as 0. So that's the way how we can write PROMs. Okay. Now here, in order to access the information, now we are going little in depth related to your RAM and ROM. Now, how these instructions are getting executed? For example, you wanted to watch a movie which is present in your D drive. Okay, in D drive you have a folder called movies, and in that you have a favorite movie which you want to see right now. So what you people are going to do? You simply go to that particular folder. Okay, D drive. You will click on that, double click. So what happens here, when you're double clicking it, you people are generating a event. That is nothing but we call it as interrupt. Okay, you people are generating an event there. Double clicking means event. Now how the operating system comes to know, okay, the user has clicked on the D drive, so I need to open that D drive. How it comes to know means it's only based upon system calls. Interrupts are nothing but system calls. Now since we people are double clicking it, that means that is a software based. Software based interrupt you people are generating. So what we call for software based interrupt is nothing but trap, that we have already seen in the previous session. Okay, so that thing comes into a picture here. So how, but internally how? No, okay, fine. Operating system comes to know with the help of what we call system calls. Fine. But how operating system is giving this instruction to the hardware? Finally, it has to convert into zeros and ones. but directly it can't convert into zeros and ones. Definitely we need some kind of programming there. So there we use actually two different type of instructions in order to convert the information. Means like I told you, whenever you want to watch a movie, you will be double clicking on that particular folder and you'll open that file and then it starts working. But until and unless that particular program is loaded into your RAM, that will not be executed. Any program you take up, if you want your program to be executed, it should be first brought into your RAM, then only it can start processing the remaining process, whatever it is there. So here, how to get that particular file from your secondary storage device to the RAM is done using two different instructions called as load and store. These two are most important. Okay, so what is the main function of load here is nothing but it actually gets the information or gets the data from the main memory to internal registers. Means whenever you want to process the information, that first thing is this operating system will get this file and load it into your RAM. From that particular RAM, whatever the operands are required, okay, whatever the operands are required, whatever the other resources are required. For example, you are watching a movie, fine, that file is loaded into your what we call RAM. But is it the only file that needs to be executed? It has other resources. It requires other resources. What are the resources? It requires the display. And if the display is not there, how can you see or watch a movie? So display should be required. So that is another integration. Another integration is required for that. Same way, since you're watching a movie, definitely sound is required. Without sound means speakers are required. So without speaker is a separate kind of hardware. So that also should be integrated with this. Then only you can, means all these things should be integrated together. Then only you can watch a movie perfectly. Or else what will happen? If any of one of the device is not integrated properly, now what will happen? Something example, your speakers are not integrated perfectly. So what will happen? Your movie, okay, your display, the movie, whatever you're saying, it will go forward and you will hear the voice later. Why? Because the integration is not done perfectly. There is a problem in the software. So then only this kind of possibilities can take place. Okay. So how? So this is what the problem takes place. So who exactly does that? Who is the one who's responsible to get the information integrated perfectly? Means these are the two instructions: load and store. Load, what it does, it gets all the information from the main memory and store it in the internal registers within the CPU. So CPU will have internal registers. Okay, I will tell you what do you mean by internal register. This internal register is also one type of memory. Okay, so that I'll show you in a hierarchy. We have a set of hierarchy of memories, and when we go through that hierarchy, you'll get a broad idea related to what are the different memories we are using in our lapis as well as in our system. Apart from that, the next instruction what we have is store. What this store does, this is the opposite version of load. What load is doing? It is getting the information from the main memory into the internal registers. Store, what it will do, it will remove the information from the registers and it will store it into the main memory back. This is what actually happening. So these two are most important. I don't think we might have come across this load and store. If anyone is having any familiarity with assembly language programming, so in assembly language, you people are going to use only these two commands to execute anything. For example, using C program, you people are writing addition of two numbers program. You know very well how to write main int a comma b, c equal c, a, enter the value of a, enter the value of b, scanf, and c equal to a plus b, and we are doing it. But if you talk about assembly language, that is not the case. Here, you people have to use only these two commands, load and store. And using these two commands only, you have to execute that particular program. Okay, it means you will be taking three variables. First, you will load the variables, then you will perform action on it, and then you will store the variables. So this is the way you people are going to write. Okay, so this is related to your storage. Now, so here, since we are saying storage and all everything, so definitely storage requires space. So it requires space. So what exactly we are storing inside is nothing but bits and bytes. We all very much familiar with that. So this is just a normal definition that how you people are going to store the information in your system. So the basic unit of computer storage we all know very well, that is nothing but bit, which is represented either using 0 and 1. That we all know. Okay. So then followed with that we have something called as byte. byte is nothing but it is equal to 8 bits. And remember, this byte we can also say as word. So sometimes I might be using word or sometimes I might be using byte. Don't get confused. Both are the same thing. So 1 byte is equal to 8 bits. That is equal to 1 word. In that way, it has been resembled. Okay. So here what he's saying is he has just represented the different memory sizes what we do have. Like for example, 1 KB. Now I might have told you in the previous class of 2. I don't remember exactly, but here since we know that 1 KB is equal to how many bytes, you can simply say it's 1024 bytes. Same way, 1 MB is equal to how many KB? It's 1024 KB. But if this is related to bytes, so we have to convert into bytes means 1024 into 1024. So that is what represented here. So in this way, he has given some information. You can just go through it. But remember, when we perform some calculations, when we wanted to perform some calculation, here the scientists, they don't use this 1024 bytes. They directly round it up to 1000 bytes. Like for example, if you ask them, if they are performing some mathematical calculation and they are trying to calculate something. So 1 kilobyte, they will consider it as 1000 bytes. They will not consider it as 1024 bytes. What is the main reason here is that makes calculation simple, and moreover 24 bytes is, I think you can understand, it's very little amount, so that is not going to make much difference. Okay, so that is something like now infinite. So that's why they are just neglecting that and they are rounding it up to 1000 bytes. So remember that. Okay. So here petabyte, still petabyte is given, but we do have more than petabyte also. Okay, more than that petabyte also we are using it for, and moreover this petabytes and all, we people are using it for supercomputers, petabyte, and after that we have 8, 9, 10 models. Okay, so all these we are using it in our supercomputers. We can't use it. You might have known that nowadays we have a systems with the TVs, and that too 1 TB is the max what we are getting it. If you want 2 TB of your hard disk, definitely you have to pay more for that. So this is what he's exactly providing information here. Now we are actually saying the instructions are getting executed, so it has to be loaded into the memory. That is nothing but your RAM, and then it should be get executed, and after getting executed should be. So from where the base from where this process has come up is nothing but von Neumann architecture. This is one of the most familiar architecture. Everyone might know it since the computer has been invented. Okay, so I think you people might have idea, but if you don't have, we'll come across it. So here von Neumann. So every system, whatever we are using now, till now today, and maybe in the future, von Neumann architecture is the one what we people are going to use. So here what we have is instruction execution cycle. Means till now whatever I explained you, that we will be representing in a format of a point. Like for example, I told you that if you want to watch a movie, what is the step? So what is that? You have to get that movie into the RAM first, into the RAM, and then what happens? The CPU will start executing that particular file, and when it is executing, whatever the resources are required, like speakers, like microphone, like display, it will be integrating it. It will try to fetch that information and it will start playing that particular file. Now, once this process is completed, okay, the movie is completed. Now, what has to be done? Now, whatever the file that has been brought into the RAM, your main memory, that again has to be stored back. Where we need to store it back? Into the same location from where it is been brought. Okay, so that is the last step. So these are the instructions execution cycle, and these instruction execution cycle has come up from von Neumann architecture. So these are the steps what we have here. So what is the very first step we discussed here? We need to fetch the instruction. Okay, I'll explain these instructions with the help of a simple C program. You people have written a C program, okay, for addition of two numbers. Now, whenever you're compiling and you start executing, what is the process internally happening? So first, the system, your operating system will fetch that instruction, okay, one by one from the memory. Memory in the sense, you people are storing that particular program in some location, right, with .c folder, right? So from that particular folder, it is trying to get the information, and that information is stored in the, I mean, whatever the instructions we are getting it, we are storing it in instruction register. This is most important here, instruction register. So next slide you'll come to know what do you mean by registers here. So in that, so these are the hardware, typical hardware. Instruction registers are typical hardware. We can touch it. That is present in our motherboard. In that we are going to store our instructions. Now what the system in the sense CPU is going to do, it will first decode that instruction, means zeros and ones. It is going to process it, and once it is processing it, it will try to find out what are the operands that are associated with that particular program. So how many operands we are declaring here? Int a comma b comma c. So there are three different operands we are declared. So these operands now will be brought by the CPU into the memory. Okay, from the memory. Okay, and where it will be stored? Internal registers. What are the internal registers? Means these are the hardware memory which are used for storing the information temporarily. Once your program gets executed, you move out of from that particular program, all these operands will be removed from this internal registers. It will not store it permanently because these registers are very, very expensive and they have very small amount of space. Means they are very fast in performing because I told you, its internal registers are hardware. So they are very fast in performing the operation. So once these operands are also being received, now what we need to do, the CPU will start performing the operation. That is nothing but C equal to A plus B. And once the task is completed, now what we have to do, we might want to store our result. Whatever the result we got, we want to store it back in memory. So that is, so this is what comes under your instruction execution cycle. Simple. Fetching the instruction from the memory, storing it into register. Fetching the operands from the memory and storing into register. Perform the operation, get the result, and these result is again stored back into the memory. This is what comes under your von Neumann architecture. And remember, this is actually developed in 1950s by the Hungarian American scientist. Okay, his name is von Neumann. He is a Hungarian American scientist. Okay, so in 1945, he has actually developed this. So since then, we are following the same basis. So this is what we can say, this is the basic for our computer operating systems working. Okay, so this is what about related to your von Neumann architecture. Okay, so basically, since you might get a means generally what the thought we will come across here is, sir, we are actually executing everything, bringing that particular means whatever we want to execute, we are bringing it into our RAM and then we are executing it. Why don't we keep everything into in our RAM? Well, the answer you people know very well. So we have a limitation for our main memory RAM. That is, it is first thing is it is very small in size. For example, if you buy a laptop now, you might be having a 8 GB of RAM. Coming to your external hard disk, you'll have some 1 TB. There is a lot of difference. You can't keep 1 TB of data in your 8 GB of RAM, right? Why? Why we can't keep? Because the size is very less. And what is the second drawback we have for RAM is nothing but we have it's a volatile storage device. Volatile is nothing but the one which actually loses the power as well as the information once the power has been disconnected from the system. Okay, so that is what. So because of these two drawbacks, we are not able to store our programs and the data directly into our RAM. Rather, we require separate storage device to store our information securely, and that is nothing but your secondary storage device. We'll come across to that. Now I will show you the hierarchy here. Okay, so we are coming across your secondary storage device hierarchies. So here this is the hierarchy we have. Okay, so this is the actual hierarchy what we do have. So we have external hard disk. I am talking about external hard disk. Your external hard disk is actually made of magnetic tape which is present at the bottom. Now this hierarchy I am going to explain from top to bottom. Please understand this very carefully. Okay, the approach what I'm going to follow here is top to bottom, means from registers to magnetic tape. Now, as you people go from registers to magnetic tape downwards, the cost per bit for each memory will decrease. All these are memories. Register is a memory, cache is a memory, main memory is a memory. These all things are memories. Okay. Now, as you are approaching from top to bottom, the cost will decrease, but the access time will increase. Remember this, this is most important. As you people are coming from top to bottom, the cost of each memory will keep on decreasing. That means the cost of the cache will be less than the cost of register. The cost of main memory, that is your RAM, will be less than the cache memory and register. These are very costly. And if you go for solid state disk, the cost will again less for solid state disk when compared to your main memory, cache, and register. But when you are going from top to bottom, cost is also getting decreased. Same way, the access time means the response time of these external hardware devices will increase. Means registers can perform very fastly. Whatever the information you people are storing in this, you'll get it in microseconds. But if you're coming to cache, it will delay. Like, if a register takes 10 microseconds to or nanoseconds task, this will take microseconds. Cache will take microseconds. And the main memory might take some seconds. Solid state, few more seconds. Like, if main memory takes 10 seconds, it may take some 20 to 30 seconds. Hard disk, it may take in minutes. Optical disk, more time. Magnetic disk, much more time, maybe 500 seconds like that. In that way, the access time will increase. Okay. So these are the registers what we have. Now remember here, this is the central part. The solid state disk, what you people are observing here, solid state disk. This is the central part. Above this, whatever the memory you people are seeing, that is nothing but your register, your cache and main memory. All these three are volatile in nature. Remember that register, cache, main memory, that is your RAM. All these three are volatile. In the sense, as soon as you're disconnecting the power, whatever the data is present in registers, cache and memory will get erased. Okay, and all the remaining memories from solid state disk to magnetic tape, all are volatile in nature. Actually, whatever the hard disk we are using nowadays, that is related to your magnetic tapes. It consists of magnetic tapes. And this magnetic tapes, how it look like, and what is the structure internally we have. Well, we can't see that with our naked eye right now. You can understand. For example, if you open the hard disk, you see a rectangle kind of box. Okay, in your personal computer, or it can be like your lappy. If you open a hard disk, you can see it's like a rectangle box, a thicker in size. But what is present inside that we can't see. But I will try to show you of that in a pictorial way in the sixth unit. So in the fifth unit, we will be coming across this magnetic tapes, and there I will show you how it looks like. Okay, for time being, you can understand that the external storage device, that is our hard disk, is made of magnetic tapes. Okay, so this is the hierarchy. And you might get an idea that why I'm not discussing about solid state. I said that above solid state is these are volatile. Below this are non-volatile. Then what about this solid state? Well, solid state disk can act as both ways, volatile as well as non-volatile. Volatile, how it is going to do? Now that is the question. Okay. So volatile, how I am saying it means same. Sorry, non-volatile. How I am saying that solid state disk is non-volatile means internally this particular disk will have a backup, power backup. Like we people have UPS in our system. So whenever there is a power failure, our system should not shut down immediately. So we have a backup, right? Same way internally we have a very small hardware device as a power backup. So what happens here, whenever a system's power gets failed or it is get disconnected, this solid state disk, okay, it will not shut it very fastly as soon as your system is getting shut up. So here what it is going to do is, okay, solid state disk is actually made of DRAM. Remember that? DRAM, dynamic RAM. Already I told you in the previous slide when we were discussing about RAM. So here this solid state disk, whatever the information is present in DRAM, whenever there is a power failure, this information is got and stored into your disk, which is magnetic disk. So internally there will be a magnetic disk and a power generator present for this solid state disk. That's why it is called as non-volatile. And whenever the power is back up, again the controller will try to get the information from the disk and load it back into your solid state disk. Okay, so this is what actually happens here. Now this solid state disk is actually of different types. We have very different types here. So what are the different types we do have here is nothing but three different types. Large DRAM. As I told you that this solid state disk is made of dynamic RAM. Okay, dynamic random access memory. Now we have another type of solid state disk. That is what we call it as flash memory. Okay, you might have get an idea now. Flash means we have a smartphone and that will have a flash for camera. Yes, exactly. That is what we call it as flash memory. And this memory doesn't require backup. This memory is non-volatile, but it doesn't require backup. But there is a small difference between DRAM and flash memory. What is that is the speed of DRAM is much more faster when compared to the flash memory. Okay, that is the only difference what we do have. Remaining is same. And the last one what we have is NVRAM. NVRAM is nothing but it is the kind of a DRAM which has a battery backup. And don't assume that this battery backup is like our UPS. No, no, no. It's a very small, tiny hardware what we have. Okay, that will be fitted. That will be what we call assembled in our motherboard. So you can understand what is the size of a motherboard, and there it is assembled. That battery backup will be assembled there. So you can understand how small it will be. It's only for some few seconds or few minutes only for getting the data from this particular solid state disk and storing it into the normal disk, okay, and then shutting it up. And once the power supply comes, there will be a controller there. He will try to get the details from there, and it will again store it back into the solid state disk. So this is what all about your hierarchy. Remember that. Only thing you people have to keep in mind is the cost will, as you are going from top to bottom, the cost will decrease, but the access time will increase. That is most important. Okay, now we'll come across the different managements here. So we have different managements. As I told you that we have a process management. Your operating system is not made of a single program. There are multiple different modules. Okay, and all these modules need to be integrated. Like we have a process module, we have a memory module, we have IBIO module. Okay, IBIO is entirely different from your memory module. Memory module is entirely different from your process module. All these modules have been created separately. All these are programs. These programs are separately created and these programs are integrated now. Okay, so definitely when you people are integrating two to different type of projects together, there should be some mechanism to manage the information. Okay, so because like you people, there are 50 people are there in your class, so that has been divided into 5 batches. For each batch there are 10 people. 10 people are doing one kind of module, another 10 are doing another kind of module. Now this has to be integrated perfectly. So when we integrate them, we come across some different type of problems. What kind of problems? Maybe signal problems. When you're sending the data, means 2 or 3 people are sending the data simultaneously and we have a single bus. So what will happen? Definitely there will be a crash. Okay, the data will not reach. So these problems, this has to be addressed very perfectly. For that purpose, we need managers and that managers will be represented here as process management, memory management, storage management. Okay, so they will have a managers here who will make sure that everything is done very smoothly. Every function is performed very smoothly. Okay. So first, before discussing that, I want to explain about process. What do you mean by a process? Well, you people have very brief idea related to a program. What is the program? Nothing but set of instructions. Basic answer what the everyone will provide is a set of instructions are nothing but a program. For example, your C program is there. That is a program, right? You have written some instructions there to perform some operation. That is the program. Now, this program will not execute the instructions until you get that instruction into the main memory, right? That you should have a clear idea about that. A program which people have stored in your secondary storage device, okay, until and unless you're bringing that into the main memory, it will not be get executed, right? So when you people are bringing this particular program into the main memory, it will start performing operations, and that process is what we call it as a process, whatever the operation it is performing. So a program which is under execution is called as process. Simple. In lab, you people are writing a C program. Okay, you people have written the program. You did not compile it. You did not execute it. That is a simple program, and that is what we call it as passive entity. Okay, passive entity. Now I ask you people to now execute that program. What you will do? You will start compiling that program first, and then remaining process is taken care by the CPU. So that entire thing is what? That entire journey from compilation to execution of your program is what we call it as a process. So in simple statement, what we can say is a program in execution is what we call it as a process. And that's why, since it is performing some task, we call it as an active entity. Passive in the sense your program is a passive entity. Until and unless you are executing that particular program, it will not execute. It will be stored in the secondary memory as it is. That's why it is called as a passive entity. But once you bring it into the main memory and start executing it, then that becomes an active entity. Okay, so when this process is getting executed, as I told you, like you people are executing a C program, you want, so when it is started processing it, so it requires certain resources, right? What are the resources it requires? Definitely it requires CPU time, because CPU is the one which is going to execute the instructions. So it requires that particular what we call CPU time is required. Now apart from that, what else is required? So definitely memory is required. Why? Because whatever the operands you people have declared, like int a comma b comma c. Now these three operands or the variables need to be stored. So if you require to store that information, where we need to store? Obviously in the memory. The memory should be provided with the addresses, right? So that information. Now when you are doing this, IBA devices are also required. IBA in the sense like, for example, you have written a program to read a file. So file is located in some other location. So we have to fetch that particular file from that location. So definitely we require a resource for that. So those all things comes under resources. All these resources means to one process to get executed successfully, it requires lot of processes. Okay, sorry, resources. Lot of resources are required. That resources may be in a format of a CPU cycles, or it may be in a format of a memory, or it may be in a format of a IBA device and files. Okay. Now, apart from that, initialization of the data, like if people are giving int a comma b comma c, a equal to 10, b equal to 20. So that is initialization. So that information also need to be stored somewhere. So whenever a process is executing, it definitely requires several different type of resources. Okay. Fine. Now, whenever the process terminates, it going real means what he is saying in this particular point is once your task is completed, your program is getting executed, you got the result. Now, what happens? You are going to the next program. So, what happens now? The next program should be loaded into RAM. In that case, the previous program which is already executed, that should be brought out from RAM and it should be stored in the location where you people have saved it. If you're not doing that, what will happen? We know the RAM size is small. If you keep on loading the what we call the programs into the RAM and execute it, and you're not getting that particular programs out of RAM, then what will happen? After certain limit, whatever the limit might be, 4 GB or 8 GB, once that performance is done, it will say that main memory doesn't have sufficient memory to execute your programs. So that's what the problem is. Okay. So after the termination of that particular process, whatever resources allocated to that particular process should be taken back. Who is going to take back? Don't worry, we are not going to take back that. Only the operating system is going to take back. Okay, and this is entirely internal process. We can't see, and even I can't show you people what we call by opening it how it exactly does. It is purely done internally by operating system. Okay, yeah. And now coming to this particular process, these processes can be a single-threaded process. Now you people have a brief idea about threading concepts. I think Java has been completed, right? So you people will have idea related to threading concepts, single-threaded, multi-threaded. Now here, if a single-threaded process is been executed in your system, it will have only one program counter. So I think you people have idea about program counter. Program counter is nothing but it's a very small memory which will fetch the next instruction that need to be executed. Like you people have written a program like main bracket open int a comma b comma c. So this is the first line will be executed. Int a, b, c are getting executed. In the program counter, the next step will be there. Like what is the next step? A equal to 10. So that information will be present in that. So when A equal to 10 is getting executed, the program counter will contain the next step. What is the next step? B equal to 20. So that instruction will be present in your program counter. So simple words, what do you mean by program counter is nothing but it consists of the next instruction that need to be executed. That is represented in program counter. And as I am telling this process one by one, you can understand that all these instructions are getting executed sequentially one after another. Okay. Now, when you talk about multi-threaded process, that you people have already been working in Java, like threading concepts. You might have created a single threaded processes. You might have created multi-threaded process. Okay. So when you people are talking about multi-threaded process here, the multiple processes will be executing within that processes. Multiple threads will be executing parallelly. And when these people are doing it, multiplexing concept comes into picture. What do you mean by multiplexing here is, whatever the multiple task has been transmitted from one location to another, or the signals have been transmitted, they are synchronized with each other. Well, that we will see in the second unit related to multiplexing concepts and how this synchronization, inter-process communication takes place, that we will see in the second unit. For timing, you can understand that when multi-threaded processes are getting executed, they will transmit or they will use multiplexing concept to transmit the instructions so that these instructions are not getting collided with each other. That is what he's saying in this particular scenario. Well, he is talking about the architecture. Well, we don't have any architecture for process management, but we have certain activities or certain responsibilities the operating system must make sure related to process management. So, what are the responsibilities this particular process management is having? So, as I told you, management means we have a manager. What is the responsibility of a manager? He is responsible for creating a process and deleting a process, both from the user and the system. See, remember, if you're opening a Word file and you're performing any operation, means you're writing some text in the Word file, that is a process. If you're opening a web browser, you're surfing something in that, okay? You're just surfing or just trying to kill your time by doing, means seeing the stuff. So that is one type of process. If you're trying to watch a movie, the movie is running, that is one type of process. Everything. If you're closing the movie, that becomes a program, file. Okay, the file consists of program. Okay, and that program is getting executed, then that is what we call process. So the operating system has a responsibility to create a process and delete a process. That may be a user related process or it may be a system related process. Same way suspending, resuming. Like if people are watching a movie, suddenly your mother or your parents or any of your father or mother has called you. What you will do? You'll pause the movie and you're going. So what you're doing there, you're just suspending that particular moment, that particular operation. Okay. And again, what you're doing after the task is completed, you're coming back and again you're resuming the movie and you start watching it. So suspending and resuming. Same way, providing message for process synchronization. Process synchronization, I told you, na, in your mobile phones, you have a best feature. You can synchronize your contacts with your Gmail. What do you mean by synchronization here is nothing but these will get integrated with your Gmail account. Okay. So whenever you lose your data, for example, your system, you have formatted your system. So earlier, there is a no process, there is no technique called as synchronization. So in that case, what happens if your mobile phone gets formatted, all the contacts present in that particular mobile will just vanish. Okay, again you have to retype it. But now because of the synchronization, what happened? This will get synchronized with your Gmail. Means whatever the new contacts you people are adding it up, that will be restored in your Gmail. As soon as you are opening your system after the reboot and you're logging in with your Gmail account, all the contacts which are present in the Gmail will come back to your mobile phone. That is what we call process synchronization. Synchronizing with other devices. Okay. So even that is what he's talking about. Okay. Next, providing mechanism for process communication. So definitely some mechanism need to be provided that we'll see across when we'll talk about process in the second unit. So entire process related information we are going to see in the second unit. Then we have something called deadlock handling. Deadlock we'll see in the fourth unit. So just for timing, you just keep in memory. That's it. Next is memory management. Okay. So coming to memory management, what we can say, memory already we have discussed earlier, storage. So in that we discussed that there are different type of memories what we do have. We have even see the hierarchy. So all that has been represented in this. So here the main focus is on your what we call activities. What is the main purpose or what are the activities that need to be performed by the memory management is it has to keep track of which part of the memory has been used and by whom. Means actually this memory management manager's responsibility is like determining who is using which amount of memory, means which memory and how much amount of memory is getting used and how much memory is left. This is something like a manager in a 5-star hotel or any 3-star or 2-star hotel. So what is the main responsibility of a manager there? He has to make sure how many rooms have been already been allocated, how many are left, and how many we are going to get it back. Okay, and he should also have a responsibility of determining whether the person who is using that room is a genuine one or not. Maybe he should not be a terrorist, right? So that he has to take it. That's why he asks Aadhaar cards and everything. So same way here also in memory management, memory manager should remember everything, that how much amount of memory is allocated to which process, when we have to get back that memory from that process, still how much memory is left, and from that memory, how much we have to allocate to some other process, how much again we are doing, whether we are getting back in time or not. These all things should be taken care by memory management activity. Not only that, allocating and deallocating. That is what I'm saying. So whenever a process is requesting for the memory, we are allocating it. Once its task is completed, he is moving on. We are trying to again get that memory back from that particular process. That is what we call it as deallocation. Okay. So in this storage management, what we can say, well, we have actually three types in storage management. Okay, so what are the three types we have is nothing but first is file management system. Now this, remember, we are actually discussing the overview of everything. This first unit is the overview of all the remaining 5 units, whatever we are having. Now this file system management, in the previous session, I already explained you in the first session, beginning of the session, that this will come in your fifth unit. Okay, fifth unit is entirely related to your file system management. So here in file systems, what is saying? So I think you people know what do you mean by a file? Nothing but collection of data. What kind of data? The data can be alphanumeric, alphabetical, numerical, right? Any kind of data. Not only that, apart from that, these files can consist of programs. For example, you people are writing a C program, right? And you people are storing that in a dot with a .c extension. So that is one type of file. Okay, so that is what we actually call as source file. Why we are calling it as source file? It is stored with some kind of extension. But once you are compiling that program, your C program, now you will get another file with the same name but with a different extension. That is nothing but .obj. So I think you people might know about .obj. That is nothing but we call it as object file. Now this is the file required. This is the file required to execute your program, because this obj file is in a format of zeros and ones. This is the one which your hardware can understand, and it will perform the execution and it will provide you the result. Okay. If the .obj file is not there, you cannot execute that particular program. Remember that. Same before your Java, you might have written many programs in Java. So once you compile the program in Java, you will get a .obj file automatically. Okay, so that is most important. So that is also one kind of file. Only thing is we cannot access it. Means you can open it up, but you will get all different kind of symbols. It will not be represented in a format of a simple English language, but it will be in a format of various different kind of symbols. Okay. Yeah. Now, these files will also be managed with the operating system. We'll have one manager for that. Now, what is the main purpose of this file operating system manager is? He has to make sure creating and deleting files and directories. Obviously, you know about directories too. So creating and deleting, that is the responsibility of the operating system. And when it is deleting it, making sure the directory is not affected perfectly, everything is aligned in a proper manner. Okay, so all those things should be taken care by the operating system. Apart from that, it should be able to support primitives for performing operation on file and directories. Like for example, you people might be replacing the name of a file. Earlier you have replaced, for example, you have written movies. The movie, you people have created a file called as movies, okay, but later you find that no, it is not a movie file, it is an English movie file. So what are you doing? You're simply replacing it using graphical user interface. But internally, whatever you're doing there graphically, that is been transmitted in a format of system calls to the operating system, and from there, operating system is converting that into zeros and ones, and it is giving it to the kernel, and kernel is making sure that the hardware is performing the task properly and it is giving you back. Okay, so that is what we call manipulation of files and directories. Same way, mapping files onto secondary storage means since we are getting the data from the secondary storage device into the main memory, we are executing it. Once it is done, we are have to store back again in the same location. Like if people created a folder in a D drive, okay, so once that movie is completed, again this file should be brought back and stored into that D drive movie folder only, not in a E drive or F drive. Okay, that is what it means to say. So it is C, what is the main how much responsibility this operating system is having. Same way, backing up files on a stable storage device. Stable storage is nothing but your secondary storage device is talking up. So again, backup has to be taken, right? Suddenly there is a power failure. So how you are going to get the data? Definitely there should be some kind of backup. So best example for that I can give you is your smartphone. You people, everyone is aware of WhatsApp and everyone is using it. You might have scheduled a backup per day, right? Or weekly one time. So on that day, what it will do, whatever the files are there in your WhatsApp, everything will be back up to your Gmail account. So that if tomorrow you are uninstalling WhatsApp and again you want to install the WhatsApp, so your data will not be lost. It will be brought back again. That is what it's saying in this. Okay, and there is one more thing that come across here is mass storage management system. This is required here. So what do you mean by mass storage here is nothing but a huge amount of data, not like some. This is related to your hard disk. Okay, your external 1 TB data, 500 GB data is there. No, you people have a space. That is what we call it as mass storage. And why this is required means we require this for longer duration, not for shorter duration. Longer in the sense maybe you want to keep it for years. So then we are going to use this mass storage management system. Okay. So in this, what he is saying is we have actually three different type of activities this operating system should take care of. So, okay. So what are those? First one is free space management. So obviously, since we are handling 1 TB of data, okay, 1 TB of space we are managing. So here the operating system should make sure all are getting adjusted perfectly. Like our class representative is there, okay, Geeta is there. She wants to, we told her to take your classmates to one particular room. Okay, so one particular room means which consists of around 50 sheets. So she has to make sure that all the 50 means you people are total in total we are having 54 students, but the sitting is 50. Now she should manage that space. How she is going to manage that 54 students in a 50 seater class is what comes under operating system. Okay. Same way allocation. How to allocate it? If a taller girl is sitting in front and a shorter girl is sitting in the back, what will happen? It's not a perfect thing. She cannot see. So she should manage that. When she should ask the shorter girl to come front and the taller girl to go back and sit there. So that management is also done by our operating system. Same way our disk scheduling. Well, I'm not going to touch this point, disk scheduling, because when we'll discuss about fifth unit, then we'll discuss about this. This is entirely a big chapter now. So I'm not going to touch that. Okay. So for time being, you can understand that this scheduling is also been done by operating system, and we do have problems related to this scheduling. Yeah, we will be doing simple mathematical calculations. Okay, on this scheduling, how it is exactly done. Then you'll get a clear idea how exactly operating system allocate the resources to these particular devices or the processor. Okay. So this is what he's talking about in this. And finally, here I'm showing the people the different type of storage devices what we have, what about their sizes, and what is the access time it is going to take, and how much fastly it is going to execute. Means whatever the bandwidth is there, that all is being represented here, followed with who is going to handle it. If you look at here, this is I think if people remember that hierarchy, same hierarchy. First we have what we have is registers, followed with cache, main memory, solid state disk, and magnetic. If you talk about the size here, as I told you, registers are nothing but inbuilt in your motherboard. This is a hardware, you can feel it. So since hardware means you can understand that what is the size of a motherboard, it's very, very tiny, right? So definitely the size of the register will be very less. You can understand it's hardly less than 1 KB. It's not even 1 KB, less than 1 KB. It's very, very minute. That's why it is faster to access. Next, coming to cache, it is less than 16 MB, not more than that. You cannot get. What about main memory? 64. So that you people know that nowadays we are getting 64. I mean, what we call that 8 GB. Next we have 16 GB, 32, 64. Even 128 GB systems are also coming nowadays. Okay, there is an upgradation now, due to which you people are getting 120 GB main memory also. But the cost is very, very high. It is in lakhs. Okay, only few people can afford that, not everyone. Okay, so mostly we have less than 64 GB. Okay, next we have solid state disk. This is a non-volatile, so definitely it's less than 1 TB. And whereas coming to magnetic disk, less than 10 TB. Okay, I don't know how many of you know that nowadays magnetic disk is getting replaced. I don't know how many of you seen. If you observe the latest laptops, what we do have now, they are not providing what we call magnetic disk. They are providing SSD, 256 SSD memory. Now, what is this SSD is nothing but this is similar to your RAM. I think you people have idea about the RAM, right? The material what is used for RAM. Same way, same chip you will get for this particular secondary storage device. So in a single chip, you people can store. Okay, so 250, but the size is very less now. They are hardly supporting 512 GB. I didn't find any SSD secondary storage device with respect to disk format, I mean chip format, which is having around 1 TB or something. They are hardly supporting 256 and the max is 512, but they will be upgrading it. This is similar to your RAM. So what happens here is the size gets reduced. Hence, in your laptops and all, they are mostly using that, not for your personal computers. So what happens? The size gets decreased. That is the best part. Even the space is also very less consumed. So that's why the rate is very high. If you're ordering a Lappy which has a SSD rather than magnetic disk, the cost will be very high. Okay, so just go through in your Flipkart and Amazon, you just surf it, you'll come across that and you'll come to know. Okay, yeah. Now coming to the access time. So 0.25 to 0.5. So you can see here. I actually told you people nanoseconds, microseconds, and this. You can see the here nanoseconds. So it's all in nanoseconds. So it will take 0.25 to 0.5 nanoseconds, 0.5 to 25 nanoseconds. If you observe here, this will be coming in microseconds now because 80 to 250 nanoseconds. Oh, sorry, 80 to 250 nanoseconds, it comes under what we call microseconds. And what about solid state? Look at how much the access time is increasing. If you come to magnetic disk, it's almost 5 lakh nanoseconds. So it is almost in seconds. It will take seconds of time. Okay, so that much time it is going to take. So if you are very good in mathematics, you can calculate. You can convert this nanoseconds into seconds and minutes. You can find it out how much time it takes. Okay. Now coming to bandwidth, the access time taken to transmit the signals is this. You can go through this and who is managing. So as I told you, registers we cannot access directly. It can be managed only with the compilers. Coming to the cache is taken care by hardware. So these two, the first level 1 and 2 we cannot access it. Level 1 and 2 we cannot access it. But right from level 3, sorry, right from level 3, 4 and 5 we can access them by making use of operating system. And finally we are backed by means back, I told you, backup should be there. For registers we have a backup for cache. For cache we have a main memory. For the main memory, solid state, and magnetic disk we have disk state. Okay, so this is the end of today's session. Okay, so let us stop recording.